Welcome to R&R Living Life. In this episode we chase a waterfall, see some stunning coastline being battered by a low off the coast, and marvel at the pristine waters of the Shoalhaven River. In our last episode we began the day visiting some of the area around Jervis Bay, but had not finished in the area. We begin this episode making our way to the ruins of Cape St George Lighthouse, perched on the edge of spectacular cliffs between Borderie National Park and the sea, where we encountered very strong winds, a pounding ocean, and a stone lighthouse and stables decaying in the rough weather. Constructed in 1860, it was active until 1889. The recommendation to build a lighthouse in the vicinity was made in 1856. Controversy started even before construction, when the Pilots Board, who were the controlling authority, received numerous communications and reports questioning the angles of visibility of the site from the north and south, and its proposed and actual locations, which proved to be 5 miles apart, and they also questioned whether the facility would be visible from the acquired approaches. Nevertheless, despite these facts and further disagreements by a majority of the board, the lighthouse was commissioned in October 1860. Once constructed, the 3-storey lighthouse was built of sandstone blocks quarried near the present-day Jervis Bay village. The tower was 61 feet high, or 18.5 metres, with 8 rooms at ground level. The floor was timber, and cast-iron girders held up a roof of stone flagging covered with asphalt. Getting supplies to the lighthouse was always difficult, with the nearest landing place over 4 kilometres away at Murray's Beach. Horses were needed for transporting mail and supplies, and taking the children to and from school. Keeping a horse permanently was not easy, as there was a shortage of grass for feed. However, goats were better suited to the terrain, and were kept for milking, some meat for consumption, and bait for catching sharks. From 1860 to 1877, up to 15 people, including the lighthouse keeper, 2 underkeepers and their families, lived in this 8-room complex. Oil and supplies for the lighthouse were also stored here, so conditions would have been relatively cramped and uncomfortable. In 1877, a 7-room weatherboard cottage was built for the head keeper near the stables. The kitchen and laundry buildings were probably erected around 1865 as a store for the men's provisions, a wash house and an oven, with a boiling copper for the establishment. It provided much needed space, as previously everything, including living quarters for the 3 lighthouse keepers' families, had been housed in the original lighthouse building. A couple of years later, on inspection of the lighthouse, a select committee found that on top of the inaccuracies, the contractor built the lighthouse 4 kilometres north of the intended site, as it was closer to the quarry he was obtaining the stone from. The resulting light was not visible from the northern approach to Jervis Bay, and was barely visible from the southern approach. From 1864 to 1893, there were 23 ships wrecked on the south coast of New South Wales in the vicinity of Jervis Bay. The light was eventually replaced in 1899 by Point Perpendicular light in Point Perpendicular, a much more suitable location for a lighthouse on this part of the coast. The lantern was removed and later used in the Crookhaven Heads light, built in 1904. After the commissioning of the new light, it was considered that the confusion of having 2 towers in close proximity to one another would be hazardous to navigation in daylight, especially during foul weather. As a result, the Cape St George Tower was unceremoniously used from 1917 to 1922 for target practice by the Royal Australian Navy and destroyed. From Cape St George we made our way back through South Nowra and Bombardary. We stopped in Nowra for a walk around town and had lunch before fueling up in Bombardary. From there we took the very windy and steep, though bitumen, Mossvale Road to Fitzroy Falls, one of the most spectacular waterfalls in Australia, in the beautiful Milton National Park. We caught a glimpse of the falls as we were driving along Moss Vale Road. We travelled through Kangaroo Valley, a river valley along the Kangaroo River west of the seaside city of Shoalhaven. The first recorded European sighting of the valley was in April 1812, when explorer surveyor George Evans passed through the area as he travelled north from his exploration of Jervis Bay. Evans reportedly claimed that the valley offered a view that no painter could beautify. The area was first settled in 1817 when Charles Throsby and Captain Richard Brooks, a cattleman, opened the area for colonial settlement. The felling and exporting of Australian red cedar trees quickly became the main industry in Kangaroo Valley. By the mid-1840s, a number of dairy farmers made the region their home, specialising in the production of butter, as other dairy products such as milk couldn't be exported, as they would often curdle long before they completed the treacherous journey out of the valley to neighbouring settlements. The valley has changed very little in the past 130 years, with reminders such as the Hampton Bridge completed in 1898, the oldest suspension bridge in Australia, and old Barrengarry School serving as a testimony to the past when Kangaroo Valley was home to a flourishing dairy industry. Agriculture still exists, though other industries such as tourism have taken over as the primary source of income. The first European settler to see Fitzroy Falls was Charles Throsby in the early 19th century, near the head of the Yarrunga Creek in Milton National Park. The waterfall was named in honour of Sir Charles Fitzroy, the Governor of New South Wales, during his visit to the area in 1850. While a town was planned for the area in the 1860s, little development occurred. With the advent of motor cars, Fitzroy Falls became and still remains a popular stopping point for tourists travelling towards the Southern Highlands. From the lookout we had stunning views of the sandstone cliffs and plateaus as we watched the water cascade over the cliffs into the gorge below, descending nearly 100 metres into the untouched valley before it makes its way through Yarrung Valley towards the Shoalhaven River. Not far from the information centre, I was excited to see my first lyrebird, with his unique plumes of neutral-coloured tail feathers. Lyrebirds are most notable for their impressive ability to mimic natural and artificial sounds from their environment. The Australian Museum has fossils of lyrebirds dating back to about 15 million years ago. It was beginning to rain as we left Fitzroy Falls, so made our way through Macquarie Pass and then on to Kiama. I thought seeing a lyrebird for the first time would be the top of my day, but it was not to be. Macquarie Pass, an 8-kilometre long section of the Illawarra Highway, passes through Macquarie Pass National Park, opened in 1898. This section of the roadway had numerous sharp twists, turns and many hairpin bends, often with a steep drop-off along the edge of the narrow and winding road, and I am glad that Rick had decided not to bring Gidget along this stretch of the road. We had read about frequent rockfalls and landslides which can make navigating it challenging. The scenery was staggering, with its patches of rainforest and towering eucalypts. After heavy rain, the Macquarie Pass can be closed due to flooding on the top half of the pass, so I was glad it was only light showers we had to deal with today. We arrived in Kiama, historically a farming and agricultural centre, but nowadays a very tourist-driven town. During the early settlement of eastern Australia, the Kiama area was settled by wheat farmers, since the soil was volcanic and rain-swept, unlike most of Australia. Early Jimbaroo was the population centre from about 1830 to the 1860s, and when the wheat failed to grow, the farmers switched to dairying. During this period, Kiama became the best example of chain migration in Australia, as many assisted migrants came from Northern Ireland on clearing leases, and eventually half the marriages in the Kiama area had Northern Irish Protestant ancestry. Kiama was one of the birthplaces of the Australian dairy industry, with the first dairy factory, the Kiama Pioneer Factory, and the first dairy cooperative in Australia. Our aim was to visit the blowhole, as under certain sea conditions the blowhole can spray 50 litres of water up to 25 metres in the air, in quantities that thoroughly drench any bystander. Well, weren't we in for a treat? Talking to one lady who had been visiting the blowhole for the past 40 years, it was the best she had ever seen it. In the rugged landscape along the New South Wales coastline, carved by ancient volcanic lava flows and vents some 260 million years ago, the Kiama blowhole was spectacular. With the thrashing waves caused by a low off the coast, water entering a sea cliff cavern compressed the surging water to spurt a waterspout 30 metres into the sky. The water shoots out of the blowhole because of the pressure that forms in an underground chamber. As water fills the chamber at the end of the tunnel, pressure builds. When waves subside, the pressure inside the chamber pushes water up through the blowhole. It is one of nature's best experiences to see, both invigorating and breathtaking. On leaving the blowhole, we checked out the whitewashed Kiama Lighthouse, dating back to 1887. After the twists and turns of misty headlands and hidden rainforest scenery, we made our way to Mount Pleasant Lookout, taking in the seaside town of Gerringong and Wirra Beach and everything to the south, with views stretching across the village to 7 Mile Beach and Mount Coolangatta, and where the mountains meet the sea, where the green rolling escarpment descends into lush green dairy country. What a day it had been! From waterfalls and rough seas, the following day we made our way to the pristine waterway of the Shoalhaven Heads and the Shoalhaven River. On our way out to Shoalhaven Heads we passed the Big Dragon, an amazing sculpture by local artist Grant Findlay, approximately 5 metres tall, located on Coolangatta Road, out the front of a winery. Shoalhaven Heads, the most northern coastal town of the Shoalhaven, is a peaceful coastal village surrounded by nature. Tucked between Mount Coolangatta and 7 Mile Beach on the doorstep of the Shoalhaven River, we enjoyed looking out across Shoalhaven River from the bird-watching area. The number of trees, branches and debris lining the shoreline was staggering. We walked out onto 7 Mile Beach at Berries Bay, experiencing the unique coastal environment through June blackbutt, Bangalay forest and some rainforest. Along the sandy track we heard, rather than admired, some of the many birds that flitted in amongst the trees. We were again treated to stunning ocean views and an enjoyable walk along some of its sandy lengths, but were surprised by just how rough the sea was, though after the previous day's pounding at Kiama it was no wonder there was so much foam washed ashore. Extending from Shoalhaven Heads east of Nowra to Jorowa, 7 Mile Beach National Park is a small coastal park with golden sandy beaches. Our morning had started with passing dairy farms. Now we had vineyards, oyster racks, turf farms, wood stacks, and green countryside to admire. I thought we had entered the Garden of Eden. On the southern end of 7 Mile Beach, across Berries Canal, Comerong Island has a protected nature reserve that is home to an internationally recognised shorebird population. Berries Canal links the Crockhaven River and the Shoalhaven River and holds a unique place in Australia's history, being the first man-made navigable canal to be constructed. The canal was made by the hard labour of convicts using hand tools, overseen by Hamilton Hume under the direction of Alexander Berry in 1822. Alexander Berry needed a way of moving ships into the Shoalhaven River. The main entrance at Shoalhaven Heads was shallow and dangerous and impassable by anything other than the smallest cutter. After the two waterways were linked by a small canal, the river, through time and erosion, carved the canal into what we saw today, cutting off the peninsula and forming Comoros Island. The island is still linked to the mainland by the beach, but during floods and high seas, this link can be broken. The only permanent way of reaching the island is by sea or by the Comoros ferry. The banks of the canal are under constant pressure from the river. After the island was formed by the cutting of the canal, the 700-acre island was claimed by the Crown and later passed it over to the government. The land was subdivided into farms and sold to various settlers. Mr. James Kennedy was the principal purchaser. Kennedy, born in Ireland in 1883 and moved to New South Wales with his parents 3 years later. In his younger days he was for some time in the service of Alexander Berry and took a keen interest in farming. He was a true pioneer of the district and much respected for his mechanical aptitude. On returning to Gidget, we hooked up and made our way to St. George's Basin, a large shallow lagoon with a tree-covered shoreline, with several villages around the edge of the lagoon. We stopped in at Sanctuary Point on the northern shores of the basin, but couldn't find a parking spot, so kept heading to the turn-off to Sussex Inlet, built around a system of tidal canals, where we stopped for lunch. The town lies on the west bank of the waterway called Sussex Inlet, which divides New South Wales from the Jervis Bay Territory. From there we continued on to Milton, with its beautiful green hills and heritage seascapes, where we set up Gidget and enjoyed what was left of the afternoon. We spent the time talking about all we had seen over the past couple of days. Our days had been jam-packed. From idyllic quirky villages, rainforest-clad foothills, dramatic cliff tops, cascading waterfalls, crashing oceans, spouting blowholes, dairy pastures and national parks, just to recount a few. To think that George Bass visited the area in 1797 and some 220 years later the area has so much more to offer than just for the ancient cedar forests, quartz mining and basalt, followed by in the 20th century the railway, tourism and the advent of refrigeration helping to support the pioneers in a thriving dairy industry. We did, though, leave some things for next time. I hope you have enjoyed this episode, full of water attractions. Give us a thumbs up if you have, and leave a comment if you wish. Join us next episode as we spend a couple of days exploring Milton, Mollymook and Ulladulla. Take care and enjoy life. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, living life.